Welcome, everybody. This is our SIA webinar on uncovering hidden talent. And you're probably wondering, hidden talent, what are we talking about? We're not talking about people with superpowers and find themselves invisible and how we find those folks. We're going to talk about a workforce that is growing in size and scale that is likely present in your workforce today that we don't even know about. And so we've got some great experts today. They're going to help us really go through this conversation. So I'm pretty excited about the topic. So let's introduce some of our speakers today because I've got two folks here that I think are going to really help us explore this topic the best way possible. First off, from our sponsor, Erica Novak, the VP of Customer Success for Worksome. Erica, if you can take a second, I want you to maybe tell us a little bit about your role, a little bit about Worksome, and maybe tell you a little bit about why you're excited about this topic today.
Sure. No, and thanks for having us, Chris. At a high level, Worksome is focusing on being the fastest way for companies to work with freelancers at scale. So our platform incorporates talent pools, IC classification, contracts, and payments, all built into one modern flow. And our goal is really to increase the business's time to productivity. So we work with businesses to help onboard talent compliantly in minutes and hours instead of the 2 to 3 week mark. So that's Worksome. And honestly, one of the reasons I'm really excited to be speaking today is, again, for those who don't know me, I'm an avid into total workforce visibility. And the idea is talent is working in different ways. And we need to be able to engage them in a different way. And so when we think about talent holistically, this is a population that typically is missed in CW programs. The second reason why I'm excited is I think a lot of CW colleagues and peers will kind of ask, what's next? What else can I do besides staffing? And this is a great, delicious way to kind of focus on how do you mature your program and solve the business's needs. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, I love it. Change is definitely brewing in our industry, and we're gonna talk a lot about that today. And I think one of the people that's probably seen that firsthand, Akil Seth, head of Open Talent Center of Excellence for UST. Akil, take a second. First off, welcome. If you could tell us a little about your role at UST and why you're excited about this topic.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Erica. So UST, we're a technology service provider, which means we provide a big portion of the delivery model that we give to our clients is in assembling the right team. So sourcing and talent is a huge part of that. The Open Talent Center of Excellence is a center of excellence designed to make that more feasible for the gig economy and freelancers so that they can be parts of the teams that we deploy to client sites. And the reason I'm super excited about this, I often joke that no one goes through school thinking they want to be an expert in the talent industry. Like I wanted to be an astronaut. My parents wanted me to be an engineer. And so I kind of fell into this, not really knowing what this industry was. But then I fell in love with it when I realized the impact that it has on lives. I've seen more redundancies, the kind of stress that it can cause people. And so anything that makes working and earning a living easier seems to me to be a very noble thing to make more available.
Yeah, I'll say I'm all about making things easier. Akil, don't worry, it's not too late. I just saw actually NASA had some postings for astronauts that they just put out. So it might be a real thing you can still pursue. So if this contingent workforce thing doesn't work out for you, you never know. All right, so let's get into the topic today because we've talked about a lot of things: freelancers, gig economy. Like we've got all these terms, and we're going to maybe get to the bottom of that. But let's talk about this gig economy first, right? When we think about all that contingent workforce population across the globe, let's try to put some measure around it. We do this report. This is actually an annual report. We update every year. In 2022 is the last time we got a good figure around this. We estimated about $3.8 trillion in our gig economy. That's a pretty impressive number, but I look at this slide and the representative populations of contingent workforce that make up that gig economy. And I don't know, something seems odd here, right? But I'm looking at that big blue section here, that $1,929 billion of accounted for spend that is really our IC population. We talk about ICs, this is self-employed, no employees, right? Those individuals that are out there representing themselves and taking these gig engagements. And I'll say this number really hasn't changed. This population has been here and it's been present. And so I think we're starting to now maybe pay attention to this more. I'm interested to hear from our speakers. When you look at this, does this resonate with you? Does this feel like what's happening? Erica, I don't know, or Akil, you want to start us off here?
No, absolutely. I think what's fascinating is that I think the juxtaposition that comes about is when we see a lot of the in the news, we see ICs almost vilified, and a lot of that type of work um, vilified. But the fact that it's persisted through means that it's here to stay, and we've definitely seen it in our population as well. When we try to onboard talent, the vast majority of them, or not the vast, there's a significant proportion that want to be treated as ICs, and the nature of work demands that we learn to operate in that way. So I think I think what this data shows is a persistence in just how robust and necessary this type of work is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Akil. I think about like the persistence of, I mean, about 5, 6 years ago, I think the media got a hold of this and you just couldn't get away from the gig economy, and it was defined in different ways. But I think those of us in the talent world had known this has been happening for years beforehand. And then it got a big media splash. And now it's got a little bit quiet, except for when there's penalties to come. But I think to your point is we recognize really over the past 10 to 12 years, this has continued to grow. And we think about generational talent, the idea of flexibility, ownership, doing things that matter. You see more and more young people starting in this direction versus I think what people used to see was it was after people were retired, they would move to an independent consultant back after they'd finished their career. That's when we started to see kind of the generation to focus on independent contract. And now in the last 5 to 8 years, it's not true. Now it's across the board. So it's here to stay. I think most people don't recognize or realize it, but it's across kind of any vendor you've worked with, any talent you've worked with, you're gonna come across this.
I think a lot of the press tends to focus when we say gig economy, we think about those Uber and DoorDash workers, but when we really look at maybe a dissection of this community, we see that this exists really in a handful of different kind of silos. And again, I don't know that there's really any of these that are growing more than others. I'm maybe interested from the group. Are you seeing this in any certain area where it's more predominant than others?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the big problems with the way government policy is going. They're clubbing all of this entire pie chart in with Uber and Lyft drivers. And so of course they have problems, they need protections and whatnot. But as you know, we've seen IT makes up 40% of the gig economy. And as an IT professional services firm, that is the vast majority of the talent that we try to engage with. And so we are designing our program around governance, policy, and regulation that is designed to benefit and regulate Uber and Lyft drivers. So it's a tough minefield to navigate, and yeah, we need all the help we can get.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. We kind of hit the Uberization, and TaskRabbit had become everyone's focus, right? Like the taskers versus some of the professional longevity of what it means to be self-employed. So I love seeing this because I think some folks think design, creative, and marketing are the only ones in an enterprise group. And for sure, they're a large proponent. I think that's a very easy group to navigate to. But I'm with you, Akil, when you talk about the professional services world, a lot of that's focused on engineering, automation, and implementation. So if I think about even a project that's probably true to a lot of people's heart, implementing a Workday or an HRIS, a lot of folks in that professional services world, it's that implementation team is made up of a lot of independent contractors coming together to help support a customer. So I love that I'm seeing this in the software development, professional services, and much more regularly in the enterprise world versus just one or two niches.
Yeah, I think another population to keep an eye on is maybe this healthcare space where we've traditionally seen locums, operate in these independent contractor kind of engagements. But now I think we're starting to see that really spread across other healthcare occupations, especially with some of this travel, allied health and travel nursing that's been happening. And so that's maybe another area that I think is starting to bubble as an area for this independent contractor workforce. But as we talk about independent contractors, let's really talk about what we're trying to define here, right? And so, Erica, maybe you can talk us through what the scope is here, what we're talking about when we say hidden talent. What's considered hidden talent?
Absolutely. It's the talent that you already know is there. I think it's a former CW kind of global owner you recognize there are things that are outside of your program, right? So it's the talent you recognize that are currently and constantly being utilized your team that just doesn't fit within your workforce operation. And again, you and I will talk about this. Like, I hate the term rogue spend. It's not rogue. It's typically things that operate outside of a standardization that you put in place. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the pace of need. A lot of time, especially on the revenue side of the house, or things that are on events, things that have to happen so quickly, can't wait 2 to 3 weeks. So they're not bad for that. They just have to move a lot faster than a potentially a centralized or corporatized program has. The second part is around the manner of work, right? There's different industries that are built on different ways of working. And we've talked about this a little bit, and we're shifting, right? How do they actually work? How does that fit within a technology platform that can and cannot be configured around or for that? And the third is the style engagement. And I think the CW owners on the call recognize there's that white glove engagement that you can't actually serve or own, or people trust that your program can operate, that needs to be outside. If you're working with a Lady Gaga, who's coming, this is one of my favorite examples from a teammate. Lady Gaga is coming to present, perform, and sing at your campus or whatnot. They likely may not go through the VMS or your IC compliance program or whatnot, because it needs to be done a little bit more delicately. And so really hidden talent be called shadow workforce, right? It's the talent you just know is operating outside of your current program today. And the goal is, how do you operate and empower it with the visibility, not try to control it?
Yeah, I love that. And Eric, I'm not sure if you're suggesting that you've seen Lady Gaga's background check, but we'll maybe catch up later and we'll talk. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, shadow workforce, we used to call it rogue spend. I think there's so many terms for this that we've used. I used to call it unmanaged, which, it was the worst thing. It's suggesting that nobody had control. I think we have this kind of mentality of what's in our silo, or what maybe our scope should or shouldn't be. And yeah, I think it's been maybe restrictive of how we look at this population in the past.
So the three things I think about, like, why does it even matter to kind of bring this in? Because to your point, Chris, like, if someone is managing it, and typically they are, right? There's a procurement budget that's going through your P2P. The business is managing it versus a centralized program. But the idea is, we want to make that invisible talent visible, right? Compliance, I think, is usually what everyone's first thing is what you don't see can still hurt you, right? There is, especially in the independent contractor world, you do want to make sure there are guidelines that people are following. The second comes down to pace, right? And I say, like, why is this important? Is when we be building programs and empowering the business to move as fast as possible, right? When you move fast, it affects your outcome, your services, your product, and your equity, right? This is how you actually become a player within the world, within your business, because you're actually empowering them to move things along with your company. And the third, again, I go back to, it's that total workforce initiative. If we're focused on making talent decisions with data, if we're focused on understanding how we're actually getting work done today, you can't miss large pockets of your population and say you're doing it right or you're providing the right advice. And so when I think about why it matters for CW owners, MSPs, or even just business owners, of saying, why should we look at this hidden talent pocket? It's really on those things. You got to do it by the law. You got to move fast, and you really want to make sure you're completing the picture of how work is getting done at your company.
Yeah, I love that. Let's make it real, and let's talk about why this is really important, right? Not to say that this is the scary reality of the world we live in, but there are news stories every day. Whether these cases actually result in anything is hard to say sometimes, but just even the reputation value of being in the news for some labor dispute, I don't think anybody really likes to see that. I love this. Even the clowns aren't safe. So that there's no population that's immune to some independent contractor legislation. So yeah, this is, like I say, some real life examples of where this is actually happening and becoming news articles, which is, say, maybe the scary part of this conversation. All right, so with that, let's do this, because when we've talked a little bit about hidden talent, maybe we can put a better definition in place and really start to think about what we mean by hidden talent. And Akil, I really want to start with you, and I want to look at the UST perspective here. And when you look at it across your organization, what do you think of when you think of hidden talent, and what are those silos or pockets that come to mind for your organization?
It's a great question. And I think I'm really just going to piggyback off the definition that Erica proposed and just break it down into a few more components. So hidden talent, like Erica said, is talent that you know is there, but is hidden in some sense. And I think, there's talent that's hidden in plain sight, which is the first frontier that I think is is important to overcome. And what I mean by that is, the talent that you already have in your company that can, the ICs that you've onboarded, like Eric identified, that aren't in your program, that aren't in a structured way, engaging with your company in the way that it's easy to manage and handle. That's one. And then the second is the hidden talent that's out there. We, as a professional services company, we don't own all the talent that we need when we deliver operations to our clients and deliver solutions. We have a real need to find needles in very large haystacks. And so that's been the main focus of the Open Talent program at UST, is how do we engage the niche experts needed to fulfill the delivery requirements that we promise to our clients, and sometimes to sell and win deals. And then the final component of hidden talent, I'd say, is your internal workforce that are just allocated in the wrong ways. So this is, some people might think of this as like an internal marketplace. There's someone in procurement, there's someone in the AI team that would be doing a lot, or has like 10 hours of spare time a week and could absolutely make a huge impact in the Java team, for example. And so being able to manage the entirety, making all of those components of your hidden talent visible, is like the ideal dream state of any contingent program, I'd say.
I love that kind of consideration of even full-time fractional talent. And I even started to see this during COVID, where we started to have this kind of weird displacement of some of our talent teams, and some of the reallocation that started happening. And I see a lot of companies that have gotten really good at identifying some of that surplus even in their own internal workforce. I think that's a great point. I mean, when I think about this workforce, though, I'm going to put my program manager hat on. If I find this workforce, or if I say, hey, there's this talent population, my first thought is just go put them in the VMS, right? That's what we have a tool for. Why don't we use that process? Is that the right solution here, or is this different than maybe how we would typically use a VMS to manage these resources? I guess, how does that play a role in our finding hidden talent?
No, that's such a good question, because I think that's everyone's goal, right? If I think about legacy and what kind of CW owners have been taught and really want, right? It's that massive control in one system, one program, everything fits nicely and neatly. Yeah. But it's a good point to call out, because usually with this hidden talent, it usually is this direct relationship. When I think about the different pockets of teams, a lot of the time the business knows it's Erica, it's Akil, it's Chris. It's not always this, I need help finding, or I'm going to go through a vendor. A lot of it comes down to individual talents that are brought together for specific projects and then disband again. If we think about Netflix and production, right? They come in, you have boomstick operators, you have first and second director, you have different ones who are putting together the video, and then out they go. And so because of that, because it's a one-to-one relationship versus through a sub-party or whatnot, I think the VMS, it's not quite fit for purpose, right? To think about how the VMS was designed, security, data permissions or whatnot, it was designed with a vendor kind of operating this. And it was designed around time to fill and to really manage how vendors were filling requisitions, not necessarily that individual talent. If I think about the object that's being done, it's on the vendor and the engagement versus the actual individual. And so as I think about these hidden talent populations, a lot of them are based on, I want to already know who I'm working with. I want to bring them back as quickly as possible. And I want to maintain that direct relationship. And so the VMS, I've seen it being forced into. I've done myself when I was at LinkedIn, like, how do we make this work with a broader SOW that then you can charge against? We've hacked it in, but it's missed the relationship side, and it's only focused on the payments and the visibility side. And so I think right now where the technologies are going, where this ecosystem versus monolithic principle has come into play of how technologies can actually work together. To me, it's how do other technologies, Worksome included, actually play alongside your CW program and potentially your VMS or your data repository, not trying to shove them into something to hope it fits because that's your one system of record. I mean, Akil, what would you think about that?
I completely agree. I think the other thing, the transformation that's been going for VMSs recently is they used to just be an organizational tool. Like they would just manage and transfer data from system to system. But what we've seen is what's really required to engage all the hidden talent that you want is governance, technology, process, experience. All of those need to come together and be designed from the ground up to make each hidden talent component visible again. And so, um, I completely agree. I think that's where the industry is headed.
Yeah, I almost think, at certain points, I wonder if the VMS itself becomes almost a barrier. We've been trying to put this workforce into these traditional models that this VMS serves, and it hasn't fit for purpose. And so I think our business, they're resilient. They're going to take the path of least resistance, and they're going to find those other ways to connect to talent if they're not getting the right representation through that process, or if they're not getting the right value for this population uniquely and what they need to see. Yeah, I think things like efficiency to, delivery. You go back to my staff augmentation programs. I was happy with 25 days, time to fill. And I talked to organizations today, and they talk about needing to do this in 2 hours, in 4 hours, right? And really connecting talent in real time. And there's just, that's not the way our VMS tools were designed, right? I mean, we're trying to put a square peg into a round hole and trying to leverage that. So I like this idea of almost this tech stack approach where we recognize that maybe the VMS doesn't have to do everything, soup to nuts through the entire process. Maybe there are components that we can specialize and then stack on top of that VMS as the core processing engine that have a more tailored solution to what we're trying to do. And I love that. Obviously leading to more tech diversity across our organization, but big proponent for technology to automate things. So maybe we can change the topic just a little bit though, because I like, kind of looking at some of the influences here, but I also want to think about some of the impacts to our business specifically, or how our talent teams started to work with our business for this population to maybe support it or to recognize maybe some of that change. And Akil, I think maybe you've got some good perspective here that you could share.
No, absolutely. I think the first shift that happened was that when our talent teams were given ridiculous demands with, we need a software engineer that also can juggle and breathe fire, and that list of and skills, that demonic job description that every recruiter hates. We used to just say no. Like this. We used to be the police on that. There used to be a validation step. This person just cannot be found. And what the gig economy and allowing the open talent industry, allowing an open talent play invites is the ability to say maybe. And I know I brought this, when I brought this up with Erica, I had probably just watched Dune Part 2, and I had just gone to the counter and I wanted a Coke. And they said, we don't have Coke, but you can have Pepsi. And I didn't like that. And so our talent acquisition teams now have a much more powerful tool at their disposal to get the Coke that the hiring manager is looking for. It's easier to find a needle in a haystack when there are 1,000 needles in, even if it is a very large haystack. And so opening up that channel has just allowed more opportunities for the talent acquisition team to say yes, or at least maybe, instead of an outright no.
No, and I again, you're right. I totally hooked on that. I did not realize you had just watched Dune. But I think that's so common. We say, hey, we recognize what you want, and yet we're only offering this. And then we get upset if someone doesn't like the Pepsi because they asked for Coke, because there is differences and it does matter. And so I love that, because I think that it had become a principle in the CW world of, if you educate them and train them and force them, they will follow. And then now I'm mad that they don't. Versus recognizing that sometimes the supply chain has to diversify. You have to be able to move on and say, okay, I need to be able to supply this. That's our role, not just compliance in the law and rates and vendor optimization. And I love the idea when we're bringing in the gig economy and the hidden talent, it broadens the perspective of the CW role of what we're here for. Right? It should be an empowerment, not a police state. It should be I need to think more largely about the solutions that I'm offering, not just the one that I've clung on to. And now, CW owners, it is not fun to implement a VMS. So I recognize after all of the hard work of if you implementing a technology or an outsourced provider, you want that to pay off. And I completely understand that. But when you think about saying you're only going to have one supply chain to one type of talent to one type of process, if what you're doing so slows down the business, of course they're going to go around you. And so again, I go back to like, I love that Coke versus Pepsi mentality, because in every restaurant or every stadium, you see the one that they say, it's Pepsi and Sierra Mist versus Coke and 7-Up or whatever it ends up being. And in the talent world, you want to be able to offer a variety of ways to get work done. Here are the different ways you can do it by law. What makes the most sense for you? Not, it has to be, again, I mean, we go back to our roles exist because the idea was it doesn't have to be just employees only. Employees and then non-employees. And now the smattering of shades of gray.
Yeah.
Or shades.
Remember the day though when that was that easy, right? When somebody would just come to you and say, I just need a contractor, right? And there was one option, and we kind of take that one path, and it really was just championing them through that path. And now that differentiation or that diversification of talent becomes huge. And yeah, I think we talk about diversification of talent. I mean, each of these populations has a nuanced, consideration on how to enable it or how to best position it across your organization. And I think we have to recognize those things and, again, be champions for them or elevate some of those nuances and build around some of those differences. And I think that's where we're starting to go. And we go back to that gig economy slide. This is half of our contingent workforce population. That population is bubbling up against those traditional processes that we've been following for years and years and years. And I'll say maybe there hasn't been a ton of evolution over the last maybe 15, 20 years up until maybe 5 years ago, where things just started rapidly transforming. I think there's been a lot of maybe catch up around some of the innovation in our marketplace as well. And so I think that's driving, again, that need. Businesses, I think, are seeing those engagement managers are seeing this talent out there in that marketplace and wanting to find ways to connect to them. I think that's a really important tenet of this population. I mean, but let's bring it back to the program office for a second, though, because I'm going to come back to my program manager mentality, right? And I'll say I've kind of been guilty of the empire building in the past of like, I think it all belongs here in a centralized place, and I should take ownership because I'm the contingent workforce program. I mean, does that mentality still have a place here, though? I mean, should there still be that central ownership? And Akil, I guess I'm interested in your perspective here. I mean, when you look at this, where does that centralization happen, or is it still a program that should grab a hold of it?
I think that's such a good question. It's there needs to be some centralization in order to centralize the effort and the focus of the organization into making something like this happen. But I think the key is that the Center of Excellence really doesn't, at least for in UST, the Open Talent Center of Excellence doesn't get to make all the decisions. It actually doesn't even get to make most of the decisions. When we try to engage a contractor, it's legal that drafts all the documentation and makes sure that's compliant with us. It's finance that sets the payment terms, and it's HR that sets up the operations for onboarding and whatnot. The Center of Excellence is really just we're almost just lobbyists. We're trying to gather the rest of the organization and focus efforts into a place that we feel strongly about. And so centralization is very necessary, but the key has been to, at least I think UST's success has come from the cross collaboration across all those functional teams that need to weigh in and make decisions in the best interest of the Open Talent Program, not in the best interest of their operations. Like finance would love net 90 payment terms in all instances, and legal would love not to have to draft a new type of NDA every time we have a new type of freelancer we need to engage. And so it takes a lot of selflessness from the rest of the organization to make a program like this work.
Let me add to that, because I go back to, Chris and you and I have been in this industry for 20 years, maybe 17, not quite 20. And I really think SaaS technology and how you can purchase it has changed. And so I think 10 years ago, I probably would have said, of course, there should be a central, the idea would be have a team take this on behalf of, we're the servants, right? We will take this on behalf of all the business or whatnot. But I think the reality and the ability to quickly pay for tooling has changed the reality behind that, right? Again, I'm a big believer, like the professionals that we have at our workplaces who are responsible for revenue, product, service, or whatnot are incredibly intelligent adults who can swipe their credit card and buy anything that they want at any time. And so to not acknowledge that, right? They're not babies, they're not uninformed, they're not rogue, whatnot. They're actually putting things out into the world. And now the reality of our ecosystem on purchasing, it's way faster. So one of the things I think we should be empowering, but also recognizing that they may have something that's only for them, and that doesn't make them evil, bad, or terrible. It is something that maybe marketing creative has something that doesn't affect engineering. And the answer shouldn't be no, because it doesn't affect the overall corporate compliance. And so I think there should be a governance around, I think there should be an awareness, but I don't think the CW or a center of excellence, to your point, Akil, like they don't get all the decision making and control to say no, but there should be an ability to empower, to invest, to help, and then to report, because these businesses are going to do it. They are already using all these platforms already today. And so I think a carrot versus a stick is a better way to bring your business in. So you have the visibility, so you can take care of the compliance, you can take care of what you need to. But you're rarely going to find a technology that is fit for purpose across every vertical that you serve and every talent use cases. Again, like we're seeing freelancers are different from vendor management systems, right? It's different. Healthcare is very different, and healthcare has corporate or so. And so to me, I think the reality is you can't just have this only centralized function making all these decisions and having buying power. There should be guidance and there should be ability to pull reports, but you should be empowering your business to make important decisions and then seeing if you can adopt that. Can this go across? Yay or nay? Fantastic. Let's get a volume spend. Let's make sure we have the right contracts in place. But I think we should empower some autonomy in our businesses, because that's what makes them move faster and makes them actually want to work with us versus want to hide if they are in fact hiding.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I don't know if I could put that any better, actually. When we look at this, though, all right, so I want to maybe look at some real examples of this, though, right? So we keep talking around this population, but I want to make sure that we can kind of grab, like, what are some real life examples that we're talking about here, right? Because we talk about, kind of this total workforce visibility, this kind of siloed hidden workforce. I mean, what are some good examples of where you've seen this in practical application, where this talent is hidden, and maybe how you found some of those workers that are out there and maybe started to incorporate or find the right home for them. So maybe we can explore that. What are some real examples of hidden talent? Let me ask the group that.
Of course. So the easiest, we slowly worked our way up the tree in trying to enable. So let's say we've been trying to find the lowest hanging fruit and enable that channel first. So the first form of hidden talent that we managed to enable on any kind of scale was the ones that our clients were referring to us, and we just had to say no. This is our client was asking us, hey, UST, this person, I want to work with them. Can you onboard them and we'll pay you, you'll make a margin. And we basically had to say no to free money because we didn't have the right governance or process in place. And that's the first channel that we enabled, and that's the lowest hanging fruit. And then it goes up from there. And that's just governance. But then after that, you need a sourcing. There's the next layer is to add like an organized sourcing effort for the gig economy. Like that's not the same as LinkedIn or whatever other channels that traditionally recruiters engage. And so we've built partnerships with multiple platforms, and we source. And we organize and centralize the sourcing across all those platforms, so that and we have recruiters within the center of excellence that know how to navigate those relationships. And so a lot of the mess that comes with having to find the needle in the haystack kind of gets obscured away from the end user, so the business. And so just one example, I'll top this off with one very awesome example that we found is that there are like 100 CMAs in the world. I don't even know what that stands for. Something to do with
Certified medical assistants. Is that what we're talking about? CMAs?
No.
No?
It's a ServiceNow specialization.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly what it stands for, but there are only like 100 of them in the world. And we now engage 3 of them because we've been able to find them through open talent channels. We engage them as fractional resources. And now when we go to clients, we've been able to bypass a lot of the hurdles that usually comes about in deal making just by having these people on our side and demonstrating the competencies that UST can bring to the table.
Now,
I
I'm
like
gonna
that use case.
now I'm gonna look up CMA. I'm like, what does that stand for?
As you hear the Google type. I mean, Erica, I know I've always got some things that you
Oh, yeah.
can think of that come to mind where you're like, yeah, go look here because this is great
Oh,
place to look for hidden
absolutely.
talent.
Right. I mean, I would say at the highest level, I think your marketing creative is a very easy group to pinpoint because they're moving at the speed of light. And again, like their projects are very small, like to your point, like minutes and hours versus weeks and years. Post production and production sites also learning development. Executive coaches are a great example of independent contractors. Your health and wellness, right? Yoga instructors, professional services. I think I've seen this grown quite a bit on professional services, kind of to Keel's points, putting together teams, and then IT operations, right? So I think those are the groups that I typically see and recommend when we're consulting with our customers of where to start looking and asking for questions they can find pretty readily and pretty easily. I think, again, if I go back to my LinkedIn days, marketing creative was a group that in general wanted to work and say, hey, we're happy to work, but again, they outpaced what we had available. And so when we think about content writers or people who are putting social media ads out into the world, sometimes it's done by minutes, sometimes it's done by word. Think about translation and translocalization firms. A lot of it's done with speed and per unit base versus per hour base. And so we had to think really quick, how do we serve them in a way that we can actually get them to pay? Or do we need to say, actually, it's okay, just go direct to P2P and work with them? But I think those 6 groups are a good place to start looking and trying to understand how the business engages with those individuals versus trying to say, here's how you should be engaging with these individuals.
Yeah. But I like the legal avenue as well. I always find that legal knows where these people are hiding typically because they're the ones maybe signing those direct relationships or maybe closely guarding some of the risk of those relationships. I will say though, in a previous program, I've found populations of these folks even sitting behind our legal organization not always vetted in the right way. They're not maybe the right group to manage this process. So
legal is always the one, big recommendation to everyone.
yeah.
Legal will always have seconded employees done something and they're their own exception group. It's not worth going after the legal team. Make them your partner, not your target. They're absolutely doing their own thing in their own world. Let them. They figured out the risk. Hunt somewhere else. Have them be your partner.
Yeah, I just always loved that, like I say, the risk was so high that legal was going to guard them, but yet there really wasn't any process that they were following to do so. And so, yeah, I think that's maybe a good conduit, just a good exposure to where that might be, though. All right, so let's maybe look at some of the drivers of this, right? So when we think about some of these programs, and Akil, I know you've got an amazing center of excellence that's really focused on this, so maybe you can give me some of this perspective. What does it look like from the business's perspective, right? I mean, what's most important, and what should I be thoughtful of to best appeal to the business when we're designing or supporting these programs?
I think seeing the business as consumers is the best way to design this program. So when when a consumer wants to buy a phone, they have multiple choices between iPhones and Androids, and just like that, the contingent talent program or our open talent program is one of many choices that they have at their disposal to go to. And mostly what they tend to do is it's actually, well, actually what I found at least is it's very difficult to flow traffic perfectly in exactly which channel makes the most sense. We do that at some kind of scale, but it's mostly just the hiring manager experience that dictates whether they try to re-engage with the open talent program again, or they just go with what they're traditionally used to. And so I would suggest when trying to drive adoption for something like an open talent program is to immaculately design processes. We have not done that, but what we have done is obscure and obfuscate all the nonsense of the processes from the hiring manager. So we've made the hiring manager experience as immaculate as possible. And so, yeah, so I think so immaculate process is the key. And now actually, a lot of the success we've achieved is with our partnership with Worksome and the technology and whatnot. And so another very important set of stakeholders are finance, HR, and legal, as we alluded to earlier. And I think what Worksome have helped us do very well is streamline the processes for them. So I'd say the first frontier to tackle is to make sure that the hiring manager experience is immaculate, and show them the speed and the efficiency of bringing talent and sourcing talent through an open talent channel. And then there's a tech debt to be rebuilt when you're trying to scale your program, and making sure that the back end operations can accommodate the scale that you're trying to achieve.
And Akil, let me ask a question on that, because when we were chatting, and again, kind of through the relationship that our companies have, a quote that sticks with me, and I love it because it really hits like the value proposition of Worksome, is you had said any delay is a headache. So when you talk about a hiring manager and this beautiful experience or so, can you take it, because your team works with revenue generating talent, right? Can you explain why the speed or why any delays as a headache actually affects how your company works?
Absolutely. So if you think about our hiring managers and our delivery teams, they're expert software developers. They're incredible managers. But what they're not brilliant at is sourcing talent. And they shouldn't have to be either. Like, that shouldn't be something that they have to develop an expertise in. And so when it comes to delivering projects, they already have hundreds of thousands of things that could make it go wrong, derailed, or delayed. And sourcing the right talent shouldn't be one of them. Like, it is possible. Like, we're far from achieving the perfect dream state of a supply chain, but it is possible to design, at least in theory, the perfect supply chain that offers no bottlenecks for a delivery team to be able to deliver the work to a client. And so that's not even a headache they expect to have to deal with. And so when they do, it's even more jarring. And that's why when we're able to show that, when they don't even have to think, when sourcing and hiring and engaging the right talent is as easy as it can be through an open talent channel, it makes the whole delivery and the actual revenue generating activity much smoother and easier, which is what our business needs.
Awesome. And so we think about that kind of perspective and what makes that important from that kind of business mentality. I mean, I'm guessing there's probably a shifting value set as you change that perspective. I mean, from the center of excellence, does that change? Is that still the core tenet?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we get measured on revenue, EBITDA, all the same financial metrics that our business partners do. And so, our goal is to enable revenue as quickly as possible. So our goals are revenue acceleration. So speed is a huge part of the way we design our solution. And I think that's the key for any contingent talent program. It's designing it for the business, not just for compliance. Compliance needs to serve the business. The business shouldn't be serving compliance. And that's it's a tenet that we've tried to embody.
No, and I love that. I mean, we talked a lot about before. There's talent enablement programs with compliance, and there's compliance program with talent, right? And it's a simple switch, but I think when I think about corporate programs, sometimes that compliance comes first at the sake of, and so it's close, right? Because again, we have to encourage people to follow the law and make sure we're not at risk. I think about working with your team. You're exactly right. The speed is so key, and yet compliance comes heavy with a hammer. It's 1B instead of 1A. It comes right next to each other. But It should be that talent, like again, the enablement and empowerment part with the compliance versus the switch over, because one enables business and one restricts it.
And the most compliant thing to do would be to do nothing at all, right? So I think when you take it to that absurd extreme, it becomes obvious the switch that needs to happen.
Yeah, can we talk about this balance? Because I will agree, right? I think that you have to still be aware of some of these compliance, items, because I mean, let's start at the beginning of the conversation, right? And where a lot of these, programs even were founded, it was the compliance component. And so, we talk about kind of evolving the drivers. It's maybe not as important as some of the other things, but compliance still has a pretty important role. I mean, what's the real risk of not having compliance here, though. I mean, if we were to ignore that, I mean, what's happening? What are the risks that happen around this workforce? I don't know if anybody has any real examples or some thoughts around what the tangible things that might happen if we're not upholding some of those safeguards are.
Well, you saw what happened to the clowns. And, yeah, thankfully, UST's never been in a position where we've had to deal with an out of compliance issue, at least not to my knowledge. And so, I mean, the risk is still very real. You know, we've seen it happen to our peers, and we've seen, I mean, Uber and Lyft. Everyone knows what happened there. The kind of settlements and the bad branding that came about from it. And it's not just there's an ethical component to it too. Like we want to treat our workers right. There's no joy in extracting unfair anything from anyone. So the compliance risk is both financial and ethical, preferably in the other order. And I think one really big challenge, I think the challenge that we face a lot is that mostly compliance comes down to the misclassification. There are other compliance issues, but I think that's the elephant in the room when we talk about compliance. And I think the classification process, every stakeholder in the decision-making process has very different incentives. I think for the individual contractor, it's a risk versus reward decision. They can make more money, they can work for more clients, but you know, at least in America, they have to pay for their own healthcare, for example. For a company, it's finding the right talent and potentially being able to engage workers in the way that those workers want to be engaged, and actually having the talent on their bench. And I think for governments, it's a taxation issue for the most part. And so all three of those stakeholders have very different ideals on how that decision ought to be made, which is what makes it such a complex minefield to have to navigate. And so it does require some kind of centralized understanding, something that's removed from all three of those components to help a corporation navigate that.
No, I couldn't have said it better myself. Again, the government's looking for money. So if you think about US and UK, right, with 1099s, IR35 out in UK, it's the idea of, are you doing this compliantly? And are you looking to be made an example out of, right? It's not by accident that the slide that we showed had very well recognizable names, right? minusclowns.com, but that is just too funny not to include that. If I think about the listeners who are here, you're with some really well-known and respected companies. And so to your point, Akil, like government's looking for cash. Are you doing this right? Are you making sure we get our own? The independent wants to be able to work in a different way and not be caught up in an audit. Because guess what? If your company's audited, they're coming looking at your workers, and then their taxes are typically audited as well. And then it's the idea, do they want to work with your company again if that happens? I don't want to work with a company that gives me additional admin work and then I have to get audited. And if you're good at your job, typically you're going to go with a company who treats you the best, pays you the fastest, and takes work off your plate so you can actually do work that is valued. And so I think we hit kind of all the normal ones. There's the government audits, there's misclassification lawsuits. We have attorneys and companies who are out there trying to ping people. I remember when I was at a different company, lawyers and would ping our workers saying, hey, do you want to be part of this class action lawsuit? We're trying to build something against the company, because that's all they focused on. It's insane.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, insane. And so, yeah, when you think about with this hidden talent population, because there's typically an independent realm to it, you just have to be aware of what that comes at. And then again, help guide the managers who typically don't know, don't care, or aren't focused on that because they're focused on just speed versus that delicate balance of speed plus the law.
So, all right, so the risk is real, right? I think you've scared me a little bit here in the conversation. I'm like, all right, this is something we would like to pay attention to. But all right, so if the risk is so real, why do we still see struggles to adopt these programs? Maybe you can give me like your top thought. Like, what is the biggest barrier for adoption for these programs that you're seeing? Maybe Erica, you want to start off? I know you're on the front lines with a lot of your customers for this.
Yeah, I think very natural reasons. I think resource constraint, right? I think when I think about the CW world, they're kind of taught, go after the 80%, which is typically the staffing world, right? Hit them first, but it's as many things you can against them. And you kind of lose that other 20% of what comes next, because all of your resources are based off of this one population. Same with your budget, right? So if the budget and the team that you have can only focus on so much, you kind of say, that's all I can do, which is understandable, right? And then I hope. Well, hope's not a strategy, but I hope this is working out over here or someone else is doing it. I think there's tech stack limitations. What can I actually do, control, police, empower, enforce? Of do I have actually solutions in place to help work with this or whatnot? And then there's I think the idea of the control. I think if I just push everyone into the program I think there is kind of a principle change that I'm seeing over kind of in this industry is I know this is important. I know this. And yet I feel like the one way to do it is just have everyone get it in line with what I've already set up. And if I just work hard and build a relationship and educate, then they'll see the true the light. This is the way to go. Instead of the other principle of saying, I need to figure out how to empower and allow autonomy with these principles in mind, because it's not working. Again, I've heard for 12 years, if I just educate the manager, they'll care, they'll do it. Guys, it is not working. It will never work. They don't care. You need to evolve. So again, I go back to, I think the risk is real, and yet we keep hoping this one way will work and they'll finally see the truth and light. We just need to acknowledge, no, and figure something else out. I mean, Nikhil, what would you say?
Couldn't agree more. And I think, the risk is real to us because we, probably everyone on this call, because these are things that we have to deal with day in and day out. But for the business folks that we're trying to help, the risk is that they're going to miss out on business. They're not going to meet their quarterly targets. And that looms a lot larger in their heads than, am I being compliant? And so I think, like you said, we can't treat it like a one size fits all. Managers are never going to care about compliance. Frankly, I don't think they should have to. Anyway, it does. I think an excellent contingent talent program is one that completely obfuscates the complexity of compliance from the business users.
Hear, hear.
Well said. So we've got a few minutes left here. I want to ask both maybe one more question, and we're going to maybe see if we can leave our audience with some really tangible advice on how to get started here. So I want to see, what are some activities that you'd recommend for a program manager to take on to start exploring this space or to start enabling this type of workforce? And Erica, if you want to start us off, maybe give us a quick thought there.
Absolutely. So I think there's a couple ways to do it. One is, if you've been in your program for a couple of years, you know who they are. They're the complainers. You have several emails. You already know a pocket full of people right now who are trying to use your program but complaining or refuse to. That's your business champion right there. Right? When you think about being able to attend their meetings and lean in, again, I go back to stay away from the idea of I'm just going to educate, and recognize that this is your opportunity to be educated by them. Right. So I think the first is you start to really listen and lean into those businesses that have been already really clear, and figure out how to empower them. The second, I would say, as a recommendation for folks, maybe you don't know, maybe you have a new program, maybe you're not sure. This is where the relationship with your finance team you should really put to work. And if you don't have one, this is really, really important, is working with your finance team to start pulling reports. It's very simple. Right? You can pull reports based on 1099s. Who did your company issue to 1099s? You can start looking for first name, last names, right? Erica Novak. She got a 1099. Sounds like an independent contractor. Why'd they go to P2P versus through my program? Novak LLC. There's ways to start looking at, hey, what did we actually pay out today? And what groups we're looking at? Again, you start to be curious, not policing. You be curious about how we pay them. Another way to work with the finance team is look at professional service as a whole, because what you're wanting to do is look for individuals and talent platforms. I can guarantee, guys, your businesses are using talent platforms and FMSs through their P card or through other ways, and that's okay. Let's start to see what's actually happening, and then you go and you start working with that team to understand what's going on. And then if you need to add some compliance to those tools, that's fantastic, right? But start using data about what's already happening today. Start grouping it into the organizations. Again, my guess is marketing, creating, production, and IT services are typically the culprits that are already doing things themselves because they're taught to be innovative and they're taught to use tooling to help them. and then start working to understand what is type of talent they're bringing in, and are you able to actually utilize the solution they already have and then utilize across the company, or are you able to bring other solutions to them to actually solve for that micro problem and not look at it across the board. So a couple of things I think through reporting and attending meetings and leaning in, I think are very good ways to start to identify what these pockets are.
Keel, quick, anything to add to that? I mean, Eric, well, take a breath. Wow. You can see this is Erica's favorite topic. And so for all of you out there that are looking to explore this and want somebody to really help you understand it and navigate this space, what we'll say, give Worksome a call and see what Erica can do to help you out there. Akil, anything you want to add behind that? Anything you can think of in addition?
That was just plus one. Think about trying to learn what the business users want rather than trying to educate them in what you've set up. So everything Erica said and anything.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. So we are out of time. I wish we could take some questions. I know there's been one or two that have come in. We'll catch up with everybody after this webinar and make sure that you get some answers if you did have a question out there. So we really appreciate that interaction. Hopefully we've been able to grab some of that through the conversation. I have a big thank you though. I love having these conversations and we love putting on these webinars. We could not do it without Worksome, without Erica, Akil, and even our audience out there that's listening into this. So big thank you to everybody, but especially Erica from Worksome and Akil from UST. You guys have been great speakers today. We really appreciate all that insight that you've brought to the conversation. We're going to leave everybody with a couple of resources because this is a big topic. Lots of gig economy, IC, and EOR reporting here. So if you're looking for some practical guides, some templates, just best practice information, let us know. Be happy to help you out with some of the information we have available. With that, we want to say thank you all for hanging out with us for the last hour and listening about hidden talent. Hopefully you've taken some things away and you're ready to go tackle this within your own organization. If anybody does have any follow-up questions, reach out to us. We love to continue some of these conversations. So feel free, ping us afterwards and we'll keep this going. But thanks again, Erica, Akil, you guys have been awesome. Hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, Chris. It's been fun.
Thank you, Chris.